do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lust coming at you live from Pond Boss World Headquarters right here in Gordonville, Texas, in the office. Holy cow, it's been a good day today. We've had quite a bit of rain, had a storm blow through in the middle of the night and freshened things up, had a cold front blow through, temperatures dropped. I see Kim Moore checking in. There's Tim Stewart checking in. He's over in Florida, or I don't know where Tim Stewart is, you never know. Blair Oldring from Michigan. Good to see you guys. I wish I knew how to turn the dadgum screen around and get instead of this mirror image. I haven't figured that out yet. There's John Funk. He's checking in. He knows what a cold front's about. Sterling Ebenstein. Haven't seen you before. Glad you're on board. Good to see you. Let us know where you're from and what you got going on. Travis Smith. Good to see you, my brother. Tim is in Florida at the moment. Attaboy. I kind of figured you would be. Hey, you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like. Tag some friends that you know they have ponds so they can see this video as well. And share this to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. And Leanne tells me we're running out of the mugs that keep hot things hot and cold things cold, but we do have coffee mugs. So if you guys will do those things, you'll be eligible for a drawing for that hat and for a mug. And I'm even going to throw in a poster, a big old poster of different species of sunfish. That's kind of a popular item nowadays. I don't know why, but it is. I guess it's because it's cool pictures of real fish. So, there we go. What's cold below 65? Oh, yeah, I guess that is kind of relative, isn't it there, Timmy? What I thought I'd start off talking about tonight is what we can... Yeah, I can turn my phone and use the forward camera. I can do that, but then I can't see it. Because then I got to turn the phone around, and then I got to stand up to turn the video on and off and all that. So I've sent a message to Facebook, and I'm sure there's living people there somewhere, although I'm not sure. Mike Cottrell checking in from Palo Pinto County. Vito, hey Vito, I'm just up the road from you today. Let's see here. Tim caught a bass last week, stocked last summer, 9.25 inches and 6 ounces. Tagged it. He's now 14 inches and 1 pound 6 ounces. That's pretty darn fast. That's good. That's good, reasonable growth rates, especially in southern Florida. I don't think I've missed anybody. Maybe I have. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see. Devin Thompson checking in from Honolulu. That's I think that's a suburb of Dallas, isn't it? Honolulu. Good to see you. Frank James bought into the Institute of Higher Pondology. Can't wait to hear what you think about it. And Frank and everybody that has bought into the Institute of Higher Pondology. We got 3 videos we're going to add to it here as soon as they get them back from Chico. Chico's got them going. Travis wants to know how the house is going. The house is, Debbie figured out the best way to push the contractors to finish strong is to move in. So the movers came, emptied 4 10 by 10 storage units yesterday and half a container that's sitting behind me, a 40-foot shipping container. So I hate that I'm not there. Not really. She forgot that I do my live broadcast, so I just hung up on her. So the stuff is in the house, I guess. I haven't talked to her. I'll talk to her when I'm through here. But I'm sure she had the movers start putting stuff in rooms. So the house, there's still a little bit of trim to do, and it's done. So she's ready to go. Where am I now? I'm hanging out in the office in Gordonville, Texas. Granbury's about 2 hours away from here. Yep, Danny Mack said the wind's blowing. Yep. Travis, the old office, the only office, yeah, it's the office I've had for 5 years. Bought this building 5 years ago. I see Wayne and Josie checking in. So the house is about 2 hours from here, 120 miles, something like that. Devin Thompson in Hawaii. Yeah, well, that is just outside of Dallas. Let's see here. Frank finally got a good rain. Yep. The wind is blowing. Yep. Got it. Okay. Let's make sure I haven't missed anybody. Terry Hawkers from Wisconsin. Go Packers. We got a Packer fan. That's great. I love the Green Bay Packers. I love Dallas when they're winning. Packers seem to win all the time. All right, Brian Lawrence, Rain and Lightning just ran me inside from Culling hybrid striped bass, but at least I get to watch it live. Well, that's good. Well, I hate that you got run off the lake. If you were really a fisherman, you just put on a hard hat and go. So, speaking of the weather, I thought tonight would be a good time to talk about how the weather affects your fishery. And because I can tell you this, my knowledge of this starts going way, way, way back. When I first got out of college, we leased a fish farm. And part of my job was to feed the fish every day. And we had this was a catfish farm. So we raised mostly catfish for people to eat. And so what we had this big grain bin where we could buy fish food bulk, and then pull a tractor with a homemade feeder on the back. It was PTO driven. It was like a big hopper, and the feed would feed down, and it would drop down into a tube. I think like an 8-inch tube, like a pipe, that stuck out over the pond, and you pull a little lever, which would open a little door, a trap door kind of deal, and the feed would fall down, and the PTO was driving a fan that would blow it out into the pond. And I'll always remember when we were feeding in the spring and the summer, the fish would feed like crazy. The water got hot, they'd slow down. But this time of year, when the temperature got to be perfect, man, they'd feed like gangbusters. And then you could almost always predict the weather, even though we had weathermen. I had weather catfish. So I knew within a day of a front that it was coming, because as the barometric pressure began to fall, they sensed that. And then they would feed like crazy. They would actually go on feeding frenzies. And then after the front passed, don't even go feed them. They won't eat. They wouldn't bother. Now, at first I thought, well, that's because they filled their bellies up right before the front passed. But then they wouldn't start feeding again until about the third day after the front passed, and the barometric pressure began to stabilize and rise again. And so as I began to see, I saw the relationship with the barometric pressure, a cold front coming through, rain, the front passes. And, anybody that's an angler will tell you the benefits of go fishing before a front and what happens post-front. I mean, you got to be a great angler to catch fish post-front, because they're not hungry. They're lethargic. And it's not always because of the temperature change. It's because of the pressure change. Now, it took me a while to begin to learn these things, because back then, we didn't have the University of Google. Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. I either had to read about it, or somebody tell me about it, or hear it somewhere. And what I've learned was that the lateral line on the side of the fish, if you look at every fish, you'll see their lateral line. The lateral line is a little hollow tube that's full of some kind of gas. I think it's air, but I've never checked that out. That is a lifeline going into the brain of the fish. And those fish can detect pressure changes in the water. So when the barometric pressure is changing, they can sense that. And they have an innate instinctive ability to sense that something's about to change. And so that's when they go in a feeding frenzy, because their brain is clicking in, suggesting that with this change that something's about to happen, you need to go feed. Now, most fish eat every day. They don't always eat every day, but most fish eat every day, but they eat at different times. But when that front is just about to pass, they want to load themselves up, because their nature is to build some body fat to go into the winter so that their survival rates are higher. Now, going back to that lateral line thing, this is pretty interesting. Okay, I see Frank's having a conversation in there with talking about the hybrid stripers. Why cull them? You cull them because they get big. If they get big, they take up too much room. You get more biomass, then it tests the water. So, I mean, y'all can have that conversation, but I'm going to chime in. So anyway, with the lateral line, there's a number of things that happen as well. For example, if a school of threadfin shad swims by 40 feet away, a bass can't see it, but they can sense the movement in the water because the lateral line moves and shifts with the movement of the school of fish going through the water. So bass can sense it. So what they'll do, and channel catfish can do the same thing. Blue cat do the same thing. They'll turn and go investigate what the movement is. And when they get there, then they can see it. That's when they erupt into that school of shad. But it all starts off because they can detect movement. They can detect pressure changes. The lateral line helps detect movement to help them fight or flee. Like, for example, a school of shad to the lateral line of a bass, that school of shad, until that bass is conditioned to know something, to understand something different. It's like one big fish because they're moving in unison. So that's part of nature's way for the shad to not get decimated so quickly, is because fish that do sense their movement sense them as just one big fish. But when those fish get conditioned, I use the word learn, they can't learn, they get conditioned to their instincts. And when they get conditioned with their instincts to the environment, then their behavior changes. So anyway, that's how that kind of deal works. There's David Rikes, our buddy from Ohio. Reed Blackwell, last month, 1 week, we got 6 inches of rain, and 3 weeks later we got another 6 inches here in mid-Georgia. My emergency spillway was used both times, thankful that the dam wasn't breached. Yep. Well, that's what the spillway's for. So if your spillway's been designed right, then you shouldn't have the dam be topped. The spillway is designed to accommodate the excessive rains without it breaching the dam. So that's good. Danny Max got some bass eating 1-inch thrown pellets. He caught one at 16 inches, but no something. Brian Keelar, hey Brian, good to see you, buddy. Walking catfish don't like fish tanks. Jumped out and was waiting by the door in the morning. Why do you have well, I guess the walking catfish walked back, wanted to get back into the fish tank. Is that the deal? All right, so let me see what else we got here. Christopher Aguilard. Good to see you. Todd Austin, you got it. That's right. And so here's what happens with weather and how it impacts fish behavior. So first, as that front's coming, they feed like crazy. Then they settle down, and they don't hibernate, but they'll just shut down. They'll go to wherever they like to be, where they're conditioned to be, to the best habitat, and they'll linger there. Now, the different species do this different ways. Golden shiners, for example, are not going to go hunker down beside a great big largemouth bass beside an underwater tree trunk or a rock pile. They're not going to do that. But they are going to hang down in a school and get down deeper. They're going to try to seek stability. Now, a couple of things to note is the majority of warm water fish would prefer to have their perfect temperature. So when a front passes, typically the air temperature and with the wind and wave action pushes the temperature down a little bit. Now, with those first few fronts that pass through, that temperature is pushed down into a more comfortable zone. But like in the second, third, or fourth cold fronts that pass through, when the water temperature gets down into the mid to low 60s and then it hits the 50s, now they're trying to look for better temperatures. So they're going to look for temperatures that are more conducive to their metabolism rate, which the metabolism rate is dictated by the water temperature. So that's why especially largemouth bass would much rather have temperatures in the low 60s to the mid 70s, maybe the upper 70s. And if they can find that somewhere in your lake, that's where they're going to go. And then now, 3 or 4 days after the front blows through, then they're going to get more into a normal behavioral pattern. Now, this time of year, as the weather's shifting, that behavior pattern is they're going to be in their perfect temperature window for a while. Now, that while is defined by pretty much where you live. And like here in Texas, that perfect temperature may end up being a month to 6 weeks. Where in upstate New York, it might be 7 days. But during that span of perfect temperature, those fish are going to feed like crazy because instinctively and intuitively, they know that they've got to eat to build up some body fat to make sure that they don't metabolize their flesh during the wintertime. And the fact that they're going to develop eggs during the wintertime so they can spawn next spring. So nutrition is a big, big deal. So they go into that feeding frenzy. Now, as the temperature declines even further and starts to get below their maximum operating temperature, then their metabolism rate's going to slow down. They're still going to feed, but they're not going to be nearly as active, and it takes longer to digest their food. So at that point, they typically congregate and fish of similar size around the best habitat that they have. Now, if your pond or lake doesn't have great habitat, then they're going to disperse. So they're going to go hang out, based on the temperature somewhere as deep as they can get. Now, the good news is by now, the water has destratified. So now you've got pretty good oxygen levels top to bottom. So your pond's turned over. Hopefully it did it slowly, not in 30 minutes like some ponds do. But when those two layers of water intermingle, then the oxygen levels can begin to drop for a day or two until that water communicates with the atmosphere. Then the oxygen levels will go up. And so at that same time, a lot of the prime habitat is beginning to disappear, which prime habitat for a lot of ponds is aquatic plants. So now the plants are going dormant. I got cattails out here in my hatchery ponds behind this building that I haven't paid attention to this year. They multiplied like crazy. They've all gone to head. Now there's seeds everywhere, and the leaves are turning brown. So they're about to go dormant. So I'll have to get out there. Somebody will have to get out there with a weed eater, chop those suckers down, and I need to knock them out as they start to grow next year. But where I'm going with this is bushy pondweed, eelgrass, milfoil, whatever your underwater plants are, they've grown as much as they're going to grow, and now they're going to decline. And when the water temperature reaches a certain temperature based on that aquatic plant, they're going to go dormant. Some of them are actually going to die, and some reproduce by dropping seeds. Those that drop seeds, they tend to die off, and they're annuals. Where other kinds of plants are almost perennial, like coontail. Coontail will sink, it'll die back, but there's always enough of it that it can regenerate next spring pretty quickly. Let's see here. We'll go back here and see. Danny Mac's aerator shuts off when the air temperature drops below 60. Danny Mac, you know what? I think I'd like for you to write an article about that, and let's put that in Pond Boss. I'll be working on the January-February issue here pretty quick. So we're still talking about walking catfish. I see that going on there. So other ways that weather affects your fishery is just their behavior. Like I said, their feeding goes up, but then as that temperature drops, they don't really go dormant, but they go a lot less active. Now, of course, up where David Reichs is in northern Ohio, those guys, they love ice fishing, which is pretty darn fun. But in order to catch a fish ice fishing, you're going to have to fish totally differently. Like bluegills, for example, they're going to be clustered in water of the best temperature. Now, keep in mind the physics of water, okay? That's important to know right here. This is a good point for this. Does Primrose come back every spring? Once you've got Primrose, it comes back, but it's easy to get rid of. We can talk about that when the time's right. The pictures you sent me, Vito, that looks like what it should be looking like in the spring. So it's just now, your pond's starting to get a little bit of age on it. Not a lot, but a little bit. I see Hunter Magnus. Good to see him. But I wouldn't worry about it. Now, when you see it next spring, let's have a conversation, and let's see how fast it grows. Because I have watched it in a year to 2 years really cover up a whole lot of ground. Now, Primrose is a shore plant that's a vine that grows out over the water, drops roots, sucks some of its nutrients from the water. Now, going back to the physics of water, for those of you guys that have watched this show for quite some time, you know what I'm about to say. A gallon of water at 39 degrees, if you get a milk jug, 1 gallon of water at 39 degrees and weigh it, that's the heaviest water will ever be. As it warms up or cools down, it expands. So a gallon of water at 80 degrees weighs a lot less than a gallon of water at 39 degrees. So what happens, I always wondered why ponds don't freeze solid. Until I really understood the physics of water, I didn't get that. I didn't understand why they didn't freeze solid. They should. I mean, in Michigan, where John Funk lives, those ponds ought to be frozen solid top to bottom. But they're not. And the reason they're not is because the density of water is such that it won't allow it. So what happens is when it gets cold, the water at the surface is getting colder. When it hits 32 degrees, it's ice. And so the water beneath that ice can't be 32 degrees or it would be ice. If you think about that. So the ice gets thicker and thicker and thicker, and where John is, I would expect ice to be 18 inches thick. But if you got a pond that's 15 feet deep, that means that there's about 13 and a half feet of water underneath it that isn't frozen. And that's because it's 40 degrees down, especially at the bottom of that pond. So the fish are going to seek that area, and that's where they're going to hang out. So that's one of the ways that I love what God does with things, and that's to me, that's almost magical about the water. So you've got this 18-inch, 6-inch, whatever the thickness of the ice is on that pond. It's insulating that warmer water beneath it from the frigid air. Frigid air. Did you get that? Nobody's here listening. Y'all are. Frigid air. So that cold, minus 35 degrees or whatever it gets up there where John hangs out, can't impact the water beneath the ice because it can't contact it. So then the fish behavior then is you can catch them through a hole in that ice. And that's because they're still going to eat. Even though the water temperature might be 40 degrees, that doesn't keep them from eating. They're still going to eat. But they're just not going to eat fast, and they're not going to eat big typically. So, there we go. Let's see here. Travis, the bluegills were hitting the Aquamax MVP hard last week. It's amazing how big they've gotten of 2 years of eating that feed. It's one thing for my neighbor 10-year-old grandson. Says they're the biggest bluegills he has ever caught. But his son-in-law fishes a lot and say they're the biggest bluegill he has ever caught. So there you go. And, that MVP is a great fish food. Of course, Purina is a sponsor, and I've had a relationship with them since 1995. And I'm a big fan. And not just because I've had the relationship, I've done just exactly like what Travis is talking about. Grow some huge fish, and that fish food does it. I've seen it happen over and over and over. Brian Epting says, can you tell me how much to expect bluegill will grow if I feed them versus letting them grow naturally? Also, will they stop feeding when the water temperature drops to around 60? You bet. I'll tell you I will. If you stock young fingerling bluegill in the spring, for example, and let's say you stock 1,000 of them, I'm just going to pick that number, and if you don't feed them, there's going to be about 15 to 20% of those fish that are going to gain weight really, really well, and then they're going to begin to reproduce. The other fish, that other 850, is not going to grow at nearly that same rate. Now, there'll be another 15% of them that will grow at above average rate, maybe 20% of them. Around half of them will be average or slightly above average in normal growth, which is all conditional on the amount of food that pond produces. So if it's producing good food, they can have all they want. There'll be 15 to 20% of them that grow really fast and get pretty big. And I would expect, here's what that means to me. If you stock fingerlings at 2 to 3 inches long or 1 to 3 inches long, by the fall, 150 of them will be 4 to 6.5 inches. Actually, they'll probably be more like 5 to 6.5 inches, that 150 to 200. There'll be another 150 to 200 that'll be 4 to 5 inches long. And then the rest of them will be just maybe slightly under it, not quite that big. I don't know. I just saw Ron Ardwine checking in. He did fertilize it and stock it last month. Okay, so now I'll go back to the part. Now, if you feed them, here's here's another part to that unfed bluegill story. About 150 of those fish, after about 90 days, if you did it in the springtime, would begin to reproduce in cycles of the moon based on the temperature of the water. And they would have rolling spawns, basically. See, Scott Schaefer, no wait, Scott Scafar, or Schaefer. Good to see you, Scott. So, now if you feed them, out of that 1,000 fish, there's going to be probably 20 to 30% that are going to grow like crazy. And if you do that in the spring, by the fall, they will be 7 to 9 inches long. It'll be the same fish, pretty much the same fish, because those are the aggressive feeders. So they'll be 7 to 9 inches by the fall. Now the biggest ones would be 9 inches. That's really going to be pushing it though. Then the rest but here's the deal. When you feed them, all of those fish will be reproducing after 90 days. Because what you've done is not only expedite their growth rate, you've also given them the supplemental nutrition that they otherwise wouldn't get to help develop eggs. Because when they're having to make a living, chasing little worms and bugs and whatever they can find in a pond, that's more to help them grow rather than mature sexually and grow and have more eggs. If they can have enough feed every day that pretty well satiates that appetite and they can still go prey on their natural food chain, then you're going to see an exponential change in reproduction. So that's the two reasons I like to feed the fish. It helps expedite growth rates, and it also allows them to reproduce earlier and it's not about how old a bluegill is, it's about how big the bluegill is. And so that's pretty much the big deal on getting bluegills to reproduce. By fertilizing it, what you do when you fertilize it, what you're doing there is you're creating the base of the food chain that's going to generate a lot more insects that bluegills can eat. And keep in mind, when a bluegill is small, its mouth is pretty tiny, so it can only feed on smaller insects. So that's the answer I've got for that. Let's see here. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything here. Tim Stewart saw an anhinga. That is a predatory bird that migrates. That we typically see double-crested cormorants and anhingas coming through about this time of year. So one word of caution: be on alert for those of you who are really pushing your ponds to grow more fish. When you do that, one of the things I've learned over the years is that when you create a bounty, nature's going to want to take it. Nature's going to do something to get that pond back down where it belongs in nature. So when you're pushing it, nature's going to push back. And I've seen it happen, everything from a flock of water turkeys come in and eat 2/3 of the fish in 1 week to river otters, and just be on alert, especially this time of year. Be on alert for that. Yep, Mark Hicks, cheaper than a Friday night date. It's almost time to do a commercial. I'm glad you tipped me off of that. Doug Cusick, we had 2 weeks of really cold weather this last winter in Kansas, February 10 through 18. Yeah, we're real familiar with that one, buddy. Ice was up to 9 inches thick, and ice fished for the first time in my 7.5-year-old pond. Water clarity was about 4 feet deep, while now it's 18 inches. Caught channel cat, crappie, and bluegill. I totally get that. Now, I think it'd be smart to kind of tell you what I'm totally getting. The water clarity was 4 feet deep, but now it's 18 inches deep. That means you've still got a good plankton bloom going on. Because now when all these things are temperature related. So when the water temperature gets down to a certain point that plankton can't thrive in it, it's going to die off and sink. And when that happens, then you're going to see your water clarity go up. That's going to happen pretty much to everybody watching this show. When the water temperature drops, and if you've got a plankton bloom, now if you got a muddy pond, all bets are off. But if your visibility is 18 inches right now and the water's green, and you've got a phytoplankton, zooplankton bloom clicking, then when the water temperature drops, your plankton is going to drop and your water clarity is going to go up. All the more reason to be paying attention to the flocks of predator birds. Now, what cormorants and anhingas will do is they'll send a scout bird. There'll be one bird show up, and you'll see it. It's a long neck. It's kind of moves its head back and forth on alert because they know they don't belong there. Probably been shot at by somebody somewhere. But that scout bird comes, and then if there's a food source, that bird's going to go back and get the flock and bring the whole flock, because then they're going to come and just try to wear you out. So pay attention to that. Hey, you know what, Mark Hicks, thank you so much for that little tip there. Pond Boss Magazine. You know what? I've got sponsors for this show. I've got Purina Mills as a sponsor. Texas Hunter Feeders is a sponsor. David Schneiderman, Easy Docks of Texas is a sponsor. But here's our fuel right here. Now, I'm going to read this Pond Boss. It's not like backwards, even though it looks like it on the show. $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. And I promise you, there's at least one nugget in every issue that you can use. You know, the November-December magazine is in the mail. We were early with it. And I think I'm going to try to be early with the others, because when the U.S. Postal Service tells you that they're going to slow their service down and raise the prices, what are you going to do about it? So we're going to try to get a little bit more of a head start so we can hit the mailboxes on time. We do our part, but holy cow, the Postal Service doesn't do theirs. They kind of suck, to be honest. And going back to that other sponsors, I've told the story about Purina Mills forever and ever. You know, way back in 1995, when I started getting more involved in the business side of Pond Boss, we decided to send a letter to Purina. We didn't have any national advertisers because Pond Boss was a regional magazine that was less than 3 years old at the time. And so we sent a letter to the marketing department, to whom it may concern. Now, we didn't know who was who. Couldn't figure that out back then, unless you started making a bunch of intrusive phone calls, which I think my nature. So we got a return call, and they wanted to come meet with us. So we did. Brad Shue still works for Purina to this day in their marketing department. He's a senior executive. Then we had two other guys from Purina come. One of them was a nutritionist in the marketing department. Then there was another guy that was head of sales. And I took him to a private piece of property. I called the owner and said, hey, can we use your place? Yes, you can. So we took him fishing. And then we put him in the electrofishing boat, went right back over the top of where they'd been fishing. They were stunned at the fish they didn't catch because they saw the fish we were stunning with the electrofishing boat. And we had a nice cookout that night, great discussion. And then the next day, we went to a little barbecue place in Glen Rose, Texas, still there, Hammond's Barbecue, and had a conversation. And they said, you know, let me ask you this. We want the inside front cover of your magazine, and they've had it since that day, 1995. Here it is right there. There's their ad right there. You know, and they said, let's get past that part. Now, what we see your industry is a burgeoning industry. So what can we do to help? So I said, you know, and back then it was all the fish foods were just one size, and it was based on what you were feeding. If you're feeding catfish, you could either buy a sinking feed or a floating feed, and all the pellets were the same size. So I said, you know, we're feeding different sizes of different species of fish, and all the pellets are one size. Some are too big. You know, for some fish, the pellets are too big. Some fish, they're not big enough. So can you do something? Boy, they started talking shop, talking about the equipment, and the extruders, and the dyes, and all that kind of stuff. And pretty soon they said, yeah, you know what? We can. And that's where Game Fish Chow came from. Game Fish Chow came while we were chowing down on ribs at Hammond's Barbecue in Glen Rose, Texas. And that was their number one seller for a long time. And it's still a good fish food, but it's grain-based. So you want to use that as a supplemental food or a fish attractor, or to feed catfish or tilapia or something like that. So then here and more recently, they refined the Aquamax lineup of feeds. I say more recently, that was 15 years ago, 18 years ago, that they started to refine the recipe. And even today, they're still doing things to refine the recipe, especially with vitamin package, digestibility, and what it does to the fish's organs. So they study that all the time. And I appreciate that, because these feeds are designed for you and I. You know, for what we do with our sport fishing ponds, not commercial fish farms, although they have products for that. You know, and then we needed a way to put it in the water. Texas Hunter Great fish feeders. Yeah, they're pricey, but you get what you pay for, and their customer service is top of the line. David Schneiderman sponsors the show. Easy Docks of Texas. He may be watching the show tonight. I haven't seen his name pop up, but he tends to watch this show as well. So check that out. Now, I do also want to talk about the Institute of Higher Pondology. Like I said earlier in the show, Frank James bought it today, and I saw that come across my email. Made me smile there, Frank. I appreciate you doing that. And we're going to add some more good videos to it. But I do think if you're very serious about pond management, if you own a piece of property and you want to learn more about how this stuff works, buy the Institute of Higher Pondology. It's worth it. There's premium content that you're not going to get from the University of Google. And something to remember, this is Abraham Lincoln said this. This is his quote. Abraham Lincoln said this. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. But I'm going to tell you, the videos that we've got with the Institute of Higher Pondology are rock solid, good information that you won't find anywhere else. And a lot of that stuff I figured out myself over a long period of time. But we've got probably 15 different speakers on a big number of topics. So go check it out. You can go to pondboss.teachable.com, and there's a link on the PondBoss website. Now, other resources that are free is pondboss.com, Ask the Boss discussion forum. We got all kinds of free articles, a link to every one of these videos that I do on Wednesday nights. So those are all archived on YouTube. So you can go to pondboss.com, and then on this Facebook page, I'll put some nuggets up there every once in a while as well. So, Tim Stewart's feeding baby alligators. Well, that's cute. Travis will never stop feeding. He's got a book with all the suggestions that I have mentioned. Where'd that book come from? Frank James, wood ducks, geese, turtles, all like Aquamax. Once they kind of figure that out, I've never seen a wood duck eat it. They're a little bit too wild to me, but I sure have seen, I've seen geese, domestic ducks, turtles come eat that fish food. And I've watched great blue herons watch the fish eat that fish food, then catch the fish that are eating that fish food. Scott Angelico, I feed Bluegill Optimal. My gills are big. Is it comparable to Aquamax? I know this. Dustin, that owns that company, is a solid guy, and he truly wants to create recipes that are quality recipes. Now, I honestly don't know how it compares. He was going to send some to me several years ago, and that never did happen, probably because he knows my loyalty to Purina, but I've heard a lot of good comments about it, and some guys that I trust believe in it. I'm a Purina guy, not just because of the fish food. If the fish food didn't work, I wouldn't be a Purina guy. But I value relationships. Relationships to me are real important. So the relationship I've had with Purina has been stellar. Now, have there been hiccups along the way? Yes, there have, but not with the relationships. The hiccups that they have from time to time is distribution or availability of certain items, things like that, which is kind of like the left hand not always knowing what the right hand's doing, which happens with a big corporation from time to time. Okay, Frank says that Optimal is more expensive, and that's probably got something to do with freight and quality ingredients. I tell you this, though, Purina mills, I have actually been in a mill before when they rejected ingredients. So what happens with every load of ingredients that they purchase, they test them before they unload. And if they don't like it, if it doesn't meet their qualifications, they don't take it. Because they do use quality ingredients. Let's see what else we got here. Travis says, what freebie you are offering for a 2-year subscription? It's hard to believe it's been 2 years since I subscribed to resubscribe. Just joking about the freebies. Oh, heck, I don't know. If I tell you what, Travis, when you resubscribe, put a note in there and said, Bob said send a poster. So if you don't have a poster, I'll send you a poster. And in the meantime, let's kind of freshen up that little phrase. If you guys will type in hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section, tag some friends, click like, and share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat, and when you get it, it won't be backwards. And we run out of the regular coffee mug, regular mugs, but we got coffee mugs. So, and it'll be turned around when you get it so you can read it, right? And I'm going to pitch in a poster for this next drawing. Here's the poster. What I did with that poster, I did this years ago. I went to, I needed to get away, which I try to do every summer a little bit. And I went to New Mexico, and I thought, man, I need to do something productive. I don't want to sit on my butt and read and then go be a tourist. I need to do something productive. So I started going through my pictures, and I thought, oh my gosh, I got enough pictures. I can do a dadgum poster. So I called my running buddy back then, Dave Willis. I miss that guy. And I said, hey, I want to put together a poster, and I'd like for you to read the text I'm going to put together. Shoot, within 3 days, I had a poster ready to go to layout, and I sent it all to him. He read it, made the corrections, because some of these things I didn't know how to spell, all the scientific names, and so that's where that thing came from. Okay, let's see here. Frank James, Bob, question on forage ponds. I raise copper-nosed bluegill there annually. Should I be concerned about parasites or diseases? No, I wouldn't be too worried about parasites or diseases. If you're feeding the fish and you're harvesting them regularly, when I say regularly, that with a bluegill pond, that's at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, then you shouldn't be worried about parasites or diseases. You know, good healthy fish are fed well. They're not going to get sick unless the water quality deteriorates. And if they get a disease, it's not going to be something that's necessarily brought in. It's going to be something endemic, like a bacterial infection, something like that. Fred Bingaman, is that tab you're drinking? Sorta. Oh, it's backwards. Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar, which I've been doing kind of a keto thing, and my nutritionist counselor and advisor tells me to stop drinking that, so I will. It's not right now. Okay. Let's see here. There's Jeremy Duckworth. Yeah, Travis always asks about the family and Little Princess. Well, Little Princess turned over for the first time, and she is bright. I mean, her eyes are big. She's attentive. She makes eye contact. She's about 3 months old now. That Little Princess. We got a bunch of princesses in our family. Actually, out of 13 grandkids, I think 5 of them are girls and 8 are boys. And all those girls are little princesses. At least with me, they are. Ron says, of all things we didn't need down here, we had a pretty good-sized tornado roll through South Lake Charles that tore up and flattened many homes. Oh my gosh, that happened today. I haven't heard about this, Ron. Dadgummit. I don't. Lake Charles, you guys are like a bullseye for hurricanes and bad weather and way too much rain. 175-pound Texas underfeeder was picked up and set down a few yards down. I don't know how, but it's in perfect shape. I got to set it back up at the customer's pond tomorrow. Well, all that'll be on the news. I know you guys are getting tired of making the news. Dude, I don't know what to say. That when that cold front blew through, it came through where I am about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a little bit of thunder, and it blew through pretty quick. But on the back side of it, there were still some lingering showers. I can't imagine what happened as your day got going and the temperature rose. It just must have gained a whole lot of energy as it was going. Ryan Triple, how can I balance culling bass with keeping them slightly heavy to eat channel catfish fry? For a bit of context, I finally had my 8-acre pond in southern Illinois turned around on year 3. I've removed over 9,000 stunted channel catfish over 3 years old, average 12 inches. 8-acre pond, 9,000 catfish. That's amazing. The bass and bluegill I've stocked have taken off amazingly. I feed and see way more bluegill of all sizes now. I do not want the catfish to take over again. Okay, I'm going to tell you what. Here's my first reaction to that is don't just count on the bass to eat the channel catfish fry. Where you are, channel cat are going to spawn last, which is going to be like the 4th week of May through the 2nd or 3rd week of June. When you're feeding your bluegills, I tell you what's going to happen now. The way channel catfish reproduce, they're nest cavities. They're cavity nesters. They go into a hollow, like where the bank's been undercut, or if there's containers in there. There's a couple things you can do. One thing is feed your bluegill as much as they'll eat that you're comfortable feeding, and then about the time the catfish start spawning, cut the bluegill's feed way back. And that'll force them to go out and forage, and they like nothing better than to scoot around some of these openings where the catfish spawn, and when those babies come out of the can or the tire or wherever they are, bluegill will gobble them down like my little princesses will gobble down a Tootsie Roll Pop, and they'll get rid of them pretty fast. Now that if you've got habitat for small catfish to hide, like riprap, you're still going to get channel catfish. Now, one of the things in an 8-acre pond, depending on how your pond is shaped, when you're feeding the catfish, feed the bluegill, you're also going to be feeding catfish. You can feed them into an area, like a cove, something like that. And then if you can get your hands on a seine, which there's going to be a fisheries biologist around you somewhere, like the Herman brothers, and they're not in southern Illinois, but they're in northern Illinois. They're in Peoria. If you can get those catfish to congregate, then you can catch them with a seine. Back when I had my pond management company, we had 4 or 5 clients around Memphis, Tennessee, and we'd go see them. I'd go over there twice a year. And what we could do there is we could feed the catfish, especially in one lake that had a lot of them, and we could get them coming to that feeder. And then I'd bring my 100-foot long, 8-foot or 10-foot deep seine, 3/8 inch mesh, and turn the feeder on, let the catfish come into it, and then pull the seine right around them. And there were a couple of times we caught several 100 pounds of catfish. Now, on that particular lake, I think there were 3 feeders. So after we seined the catfish, then we set some of the other feeders off or timed it to where in the shocker boat, the electrofishing boat, when the catfish were feeding, we could just run the electrofishing boat over and get a few of them then. But if you can minimize their reproductive survival, bluegill are the best bet for that. If you can get them to congregate around feed, then you can catch them with a big seine. Another thing you can do is you can trap them. You can trap them with a fight net or a hoop net that's baited. And you can bait it with the same fish food that they eat, and they trap pretty easy. Now, you're not going to trap all of them because they all won't go into a trap. Some of them are shy, but if you want to get pretty intense with it, I mean, to get 9,000 stunted catfish out of a pond over a 3-year period, an 8-acre lake, you were doing something other than trying to catch them on hook and line. So whatever worked for that will work in the future. Let's see here. We got more comments. Let's see what we got here. Bad winds and tornadoes. Yep. Christopher Aguilar messed up his flight. There's Drew Bachman. Oh, he was tagging people. That's what I want. Thank you for tagging those folks there, Drew. Nathan, hell, it's been 2 years since I put golden shiners in bluegill in a 3-acre pond. Bass are fat as hogs. But now my shiners are 8 to 10 inches long. Will this be a problem? We catch the shiners on hooks regularly. That will not be a problem. Now, let me tell you about shiners. A lot of people don't know this, and I learned it years and years and years ago. What I'm going to describe has been mitigated some, but what the golden shiner farmers do is they don't keep shiners to be 8 to 10 inches long like you think they would for broodfish, because they've got this endemic ovarian parasite that doesn't stop them from reproducing. It just pushes their reproduction down. So those big ones like that, the biggest shiners I've ever seen are probably 7 inches long. Nathan, on your golden shiners, 8 to 10 inches long is pretty big. Look and see if their fins are red. If they are, I see you put them in there 2 years ago. They wouldn't be. Oh hell, I can't think of the name of those fish that look like golden shiners. Somebody's going to type it in. They're native to England. I've seen them on the East Coast from time to time. No, they won't be a problem. Now, shiners that big are nest raiders. They love to eat small fish. They're predators limited by mouth size. As long as they're reproducing, then they're going to help perpetuate the food chain and just fill another niche. But I don't see them as being a problem. Red horse suckers. That's not. I hear where you're going. That's not what I'm thinking of. There's another fish that is native to England. It looks just like a shiner, and it's escaping me. So anyway, so much for that. All right, I'm gonna scroll back up here and see if I've missed anything. Then we'll start getting toward the short strokes. I want to go back to Ryan Tripple's question a minute. How can I balance culling bass with keeping them slightly heavy to eat channel catfish fry? You know what? As your bass grow, they're really not going to want to eat the channel catfish fry. The bigger the bass gets, the bigger the meal it wants. So bluegill are going to be your best bet to feed on those little bitty channel catfish. But as you're culling bass, cull with a mission. Cull with a purpose. Be selective about the culling. See, Jim Schuessler checking in. Jim Schuessler is hanging out in Innsbruck, I believe. John Shepard's checking in. Good to see you guys. So, let's see. What else do I want to talk about culling? As you're culling bass, be picky. If you catch a bass that's chunky, it's figured out how to play the game in your lake. Now, if you're catching bass that are underweight, cull some of them. Now, if you catch one that fights like crazy, keep in mind that aggressive nature is inherited. So if you catch one, even though it might be a little underweight, it might be a male that's just normal weight for a male. So I like selective harvest. I think that's a big deal. All right, I'm going to scoot down here and see what else we got and then start wrapping it up. We don't have any more questions here. Yep, Ryan says I had hoop-style net, but the mesh was too wide. The catfish were so small from being stunted they would swim right through. The numbers have gone down each year, and I don't see many when I feed anymore. They appear to be under control. Just don't need them to come back. Sounds like I can cull bass as normal. Yep, I would not change the way I culled the bass. I'd let the bass culling stand on its own merit. I wouldn't cull for them to cull catfish. That's the way you need to look at it. All right. Yep, they feed on MVP with bluegill. Yep, I can sure see that. Okay, well, I've kind of shot all the things I wanted to talk about with the weather, and I'm not getting any topics coming to my mind, so I think we're going to wrap this thing up. And I think I'll run over to Pelican's Landing and see what they got for supper, see if maybe eat a salad or something, or maybe some fish. Fred, here's my tab for the day. All right. Ron threw something at me. Let me hit that real quick. About the alkalinity question I had a couple of days ago. Several ponds have been crystal clear since the spring. All have had less than 20 parts per million alkalinity, and we were planning on adding ag lime. I've never seen blooms. Holy cow. What happened? It jumped away from me. Okay, here it is. I've never seen blooms or sufficient alkalinity on any of these, and I visit them often. Test alkalinity often, and they're always low. 2 of these ponds have alkalinity of 32 to 36 parts per million and have had olive, brown, green blooms. I know blooms need alkalinity. Where'd the alkalinity suddenly come from when it hasn't been there for months? It can't suddenly come from anywhere unless there's a source. Now, here's what does happen with alkalinity. Alkalinity is the measure of calcium carbonate dissolved into a water column. So what can happen, there could be some lime tied up in the bottom that was put in there 3 or 4 years ago that just got released. But most of the time that I see alkalinity go up, it's because you can't measure alkalinity in water that's got plankton in it, because the plankton take it up. So when the plankton die, especially zooplankton, when they die, they release their calcium carbonate back into the water, which can make the alkalinity rise a little bit. So unless there's a point source, which means limestone that's in the water or in the watershed, alkalinity is not going to go up measurably unless it's being used by something alive that releases it. So that's the answer. And you know what? Since the time I've met you, that's probably one of the best questions. That's a thought-provoking question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Okay, here we go. Ryan, let's see. Fish killed. Okay. You know what? I've actually seen several ponds with fish kills where the channel catfish came back strong. Leo Gripshover. What is a good weight for the largemouth bass in a quarter-acre pond, 3 years old? We're out in at 4 inches. A quarter-acre pond with 3-year-old bass should have them ranging in size from a minimum of 3/4 of a pound up to quarter-acre pond, I'm going to say 2.5 pounds. And that's what I got for that. All right. Hey, thanks for watching. I deeply appreciate it. I'm not sure where I'll be next Wednesday, which I think is, if it's, I don't know what the date is. Heck, I don't remember. But I'll either be doing it from my pickup truck. I don't want to do it from the RV because I won't have a good cell there and I won't have internet. But I will figure out where to do it, and we will see you guys next Wednesday. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching this. It's fun to be able to share and exchange, these questions and answers. It's really, really fun. So until next week, thanks for watching. Go to pondboss.com, look up the Institute of Higher Pondology, and I will talk to you guys next week. Adios.